Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video we're going to be doing a 2017 updated version of my Getting Started for Beginners video on Gimp. So this is a complete tutorial for beginners who are either very new to Gimp or have never even seen this program before. So before we get into all of the tools and the different menus that exist within Gimp, first I want to point out what Gimp actually is. So if you've used any other kind of paint or photograph editing software, the interface may look pretty familiar to you. In the center of GIMP, we have our editing space where we normally load up an image or just create one purely from scratch. And we can edit that image using all of the tools we see over here on the left. And one of the advantages of GIMP and similar programs like Photoshop is that you have layers over here on the right. So whenever you make changes in GIMP, you can separate those changes onto different layers. And if you decide that some of those changes don't belong, you can delete a layer rather than deleting everything and starting over. So layers are great, and that's one of the powerful features of GIMP. So beyond just that, we can use GIMP for editing photos. We can use it for creating YouTube thumbnails, which I do all the time. We can see over here in this little top section that allows you to navigate between your open files. I have a few I was working on, pretty simplistic ones up there. But yeah, if you ever want to switch between your GIMP files and you have multiple open, that's where you would do it. So one thing I want to point out really quick before we move on to the toolbox is that in GIMP we have a single windowed mode, which is what you're seeing right now, but you also have the option, and I believe it defaults to this, of not being in single windowed mode. So when we have single windowed mode unchecked, you can see that all the different files we're working with are split into separate windows, and the toolbars over here on the left and right are also separate. So if you want it to look as one uniform program, then you should definitely go to Windows and check single windowed mode. I think that's probably the cleanest way to look at it for most users. So let's go over to the toolbox over here. Whenever you want to do something in GIMP, you're going to need to select one of these tools, most things anyway. We'll just kind of go through all the tools because all these tools are often used. Well, most of them anyway. So first up, rectangular select, and I guess we'll use this image over here to kind of demo it a little better. Whenever you have an area on a layer that you want to select, you use rectangle select. So if I left click and drag a box somewhere over my image, then I have selected that space, which is indicated by the moving dotted or dashed line. So with that selected, I can do things like hit the delete key to delete that section out of specifically the layer we're working on. You can see up here that a giant white space appeared, but there's actually still the background hovering behind that. And that's due to the opacity or partial transparency of that layer. We can see that if I go to 100% opacity and less, it makes that specific layer, this photo 913.769_1920.jpg, more or less visible. And we'll touch more on layers and opacity later. Another thing you can do, of course, with a selection is to move it around. So if I drag this, so with the rectangular box selected inside of our image, we can do a few things to move both the selection around and also the contents within. So you can see over here, if we kind of go to the edges of any side of it, we can control specific sides or corners of the box. So if we want to expand the top line and the right line, we can click on the top right hand corner and drag until we get the right size. We can also click on the sides down the middle if we want to just control one side. And if we click and hold in the middle of our selection, we can move where the selection box actually is. So as far as moving the content inside of that layer, inside of that selection, the method I like to use is to hit Control X to cut on the keyboard, to hit Control V, which you see creates a new floating selection or a pasted layer. And then we can go down here to the Move tool, where we can just move that temporary layer around until we have that information in the spot we want. And now I can, let's see, to new layer, right click it and hit to new layer. If we drag this down one layer, and right click again, there's another tool called Merge Down. So this combines layers, and now that moved box has rejoined the photo layer, basically making it so that we move this over there and it leaves a gap in the original location. You might want to fill that in or something like that. So I guess we could talk about the next tool, going a little bit non-linearly here, the bucket fill tool. So bucket fill by default is going to use a foreground color fill. That's the color you see over here on the top left in this color selection. Background color fill is the color you have in the bottom right. And you can easily switch between those two colors by hitting this swap button. It looks like two arrows. And click it again to move back. So as long as we're on the layer we want to fill in, and there is a continuous color, like this black space over here, or this white space right here, we can left click to fill in that space. So very simple. But it doesn't have to be a solid color. It's also possible to do it with patterns. So in a Gimp, you have a decent selection of default patterns, and it's possible to go online to grab more. But we can use these patterns to fill in spaces like that. Now, personally, I'm not really keen on most of the default patterns. I don't think that they're particularly amazing, but maybe you can get some use out of it for some basic image editing. A better option might be actually to use a gradient fill. So a gradient fill is going to go from one or multiple colors to different colors or levels of transparency over the course of your selection or your image. Now, if I do a gradient fill on this layer right here, it's actually going to fill everything. It's not going to respect the fact that this box is one solid color. It's going to fill the entire layer. And you can see the layer selection itself indicated by these yellow, black dashed lines. That's the layer selection. And you can, of course, see that the layer can be bigger than the canvas itself. So let's try to do a gradient fill where we select part of our image. So instead of doing it to the whole layer, I'm going to select this area right here. And now I'm going to go to a gradient fill. So that's rectangular select, select the area, then go to gradient fill. And now I'm going to fill that area specifically with this gradient we have over here. So if you want to change a gradient, you can either click on the list here and find one you like, or you can go over here to the right and click the edit button, where on the top right hand corner, or basically over where your layers dialog box, a new tab is going to appear. And this is the gradient window, which I believe we can find by going to Windows, Dockable Dialogs, and then Gradients. That's exactly what we're seeing right here. Oh, by the way, dockable dialogues, if there's a window you want to open at any point in time, you go here to do it. You have all kinds of things like reopening the tools or the toolbar that's over here, or layers or gradients, all kinds of tools over there. So for these gradients, we can see quite a bit of information here. We have basically indicated by a black triangle, the left side of a specific gradient section. So this is going from full transparency to, it looks like this purple color. The left black triangle represents where the transparent area starts, and the right black triangle indicates where this color basically hits the full purple. And then this white spot is the middle section. You can see that gradients can be made of multiple sections. So we have one here that goes from the deep purple to looks like a lighter purple. And then we have this section here that goes from a light purple to kind of the soft red, then the soft red to a deeper red, and you kind of get the picture until it goes to the other side. Now, this is a more complicated gradient than most, so let's switch back to something simple, like foreground color to background color. So there's only two sections here. It's going to transition from this red to this white. Much simpler. If we want to edit any aspects of that, we can right-click and do things like left color type or load left color from. Now, all of these default gradients are pretty much uneditable. If we try to go over here and select specific colors, we can't do that. But instead, what we can do, rather than overwriting the default gradients, is to click down here at the bottom where it says create a new gradient. And from here, we have full control. We can set the left point end color. So let's set that to maybe something like a blue. We can set the right point end color, which can be like a teal, and we can make that partially transparent by decreasing the alpha. And we can also create more sections by right-clicking and hit split at midpoint or split segment uniformly. So if we split at midpoint, it splits it down the middle, and we can drag that section so that parts of our gradient are more emphasized or less emphasized. And then we can continue adding new colors. So for this section, the right point end color is going to be right here. So right point end color, and we change that to something like the purple here. I'm actually going to select that color so that we can go over here and change the left point end color as well. So left point end color, and I'm going to copy and paste the HTML notation. Okay, that doesn't look exactly like what I was going for, but you get the idea. You can customize your gradients there, and we'll leave it at that for now. So let's move on to some other tools. We have the Ellipse Select tool, which works exactly like the rectangular select, except instead of selecting rectangles, we are selecting ovals or circles. So just like before, we can delete sections, we can expand our oval, we can move it around, we can cut it, paste it back out, and move the actual contents of that section around. And then once again, we basically, well, okay, it looks like it automatically remerged it when I left click with floating selection. So that's another way you can do it rather than right clicking to new layer and then right clicking and doing a merge down, kind of however you want to do it. There's multiple ways to do most things with it. Okay, next up we have the lasso tool. So this is actually called the free select tool. It's called lasso within Photoshop. So this basically allows us to freely draw a segment of our Gimp document that's going to be selected. And basically wherever we start and end up, everything inside is going to be lassoed or selected. And just like before, it's a selection, so we can delete that if we want, or we can move it around as well. So to move the lasso select or the free select tool, you should hold Alt down in order to move it. And yeah, that's basically all there is to say about that. So another really useful tool is fuzzy select. This allows you to select a region based on color. And when you have this tool selected in tool options, there's something called threshold, which is how lenient you want to be with that color. So here I'll click, and you can see that a lot of this document got selected, even though not everything is a solid black. So if I turn this threshold down, let's say to 0, because it is black and white, so we have to be specific, then a lot less is going to be selected, a whole lot less. So let's say something like 5 for the threshold, and maybe we'll get something a little closer to what we were looking for. An image like this isn't really ideal for use in the color select because everything is kind of black and white to begin with. But if you have a document where one color is really standing out, such as a red, and then the background's white, like let's actually just demo that. So we have, okay, let's create a new layer over here. You need a layer to work on in Gimp. And I wanted that to be foreground color fill. So now we're going to, let's use the pen tool, or the brush tool, sorry. And we're going to draw some red, and then we're going to select that red with the fuzzy select tool. So this should get most of this area, but it won't be perfect. As we increase the threshold, it's going to select more and more. And using this kind of tool, we can get a pretty reasonable selection of an area without having to do any kind of very precise free select or scissors selecting. Of course, ideally, you would want to have these two separate things on separate layers. So let's actually go into that right now. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to delete this one. We're going to make one layer, just pure white. And then on the new layer, we're going to have that red color. So we have that selected. And now if we ever want to move this stuff, because it's on its own layer, we just need to use something like the move tool to move that without messing with the background whatsoever. So if that doesn't show you how useful layers are, I don't know what will. really good idea in Gimp. Separate your changes to different layers. The more layers you have, the easier it's going to be to go back and make changes to things without interfering with everything else in the scene. Ironically, that looks kind of like the Japanese flag, I think, anyway. So let's see, what else? Select by color tool. This is similar to fuzzy select, except with the color select tool, we can have multiple spots. The fuzzy select tool, you can see by hovering over it, is only contiguous regions, which means only regions that continue with one color. But by using the select by color tool, we can get all of the regions that have this specific color in them. Obviously, you can change in the threshold up and down when you want to be more lenient with how you select the tools. But what's important to note here is that if your elements are on different layers, then this white isn't going to stop this red from being selected. So what we actually need to do is sample merged, and then this will give you a much better selection of this red area. Sample merged takes all of the visible layers combined when it comes to your selection. You're still selecting only one layer, of course. So let's see, increase the threshold until you get it right, and more or less you select the areas you want to change. So you can edit that however you want. Obviously, it's going to be a little better when you don't have that blur from a non 100% hardness brush. This is 50% hardness on the brush. And what this hardness is referring to is when it comes to the edges, how solid are they going to be? 100% hardness means that the entire area that you brush is going to be one solid color, and there's not going to be any of that fading. If you set the hardness to lower, there's going to be some fading. Okay, next up, the scissor select tool. And this would be pretty useful for this kind of thing. So you have like a circle here, right? And you want to select as much of it as possible, but drawing with the freehand select tool is kind of tricky, right? Like you can try to do it, but you're not going to get it that precise because you're not a robot. But the scissor select tool is basically being a robot. So with the scissor select tool, I'm going to press up here and create some selections around this area until we get, roughly speaking, a circle. Now, you can see that with this lack of solid hardness, it's not exactly a perfect selection. We can, of course, add more points in to kind of get it to be a little bit more accurate. But the general idea is that it's kind of going to automatically draw around the object, and we'd be able to select it and cut out. So as long as you've completed the circuit, you can click on the inside to get your selection, delete it, whatever you need to do. Probably a little bit more useful when you have solid colors rather than this transparency, but it's a good alternative to the free select tool. We're going to skip over the foreground select tool for now. I actually don't have a lot of experience with that particular one, so I don't think it's going to be too necessary for most people out there. Maybe we can create some future advanced tutorials for that kind of thing. But we'll go straight to the paths tool next. So paths is kind of like a pen select tool in other programs. The idea is you click somewhere and then you create a path by clicking at the main points you want the path to end up with. So the idea with the path is that you can get a pretty precise selection, and when you get down to the end, if you want to actually complete the circuit of the path, you can hold Control down and then click. You can see a little join icon between those two spots. And now we have a path selected, which actually gets created not in our image, but over on this paths area. So if we were to do something like a print out, and hopefully this will give us like a print preview. Yeah, there we go. You can see the path doesn't show up. So it's invisible until you actually do something with the path. And on the select menu of right click, we can choose from path selection, which means that with this path, it's going to create a selection inside of Gimp that we can do things with, like use the paint bucket tool to draw on. So you can see that for kind of blocky, precise shapes, maybe kind of geometric, that the path select tool may be useful for you. Of course, since that's a selection, we can do things like add in our weird gradients we created earlier. Of course, we can stroke the selection now that we have a selection rather than the path. So let's add a line there. And we can always just go back and use this path because it's always going to be there until we delete it. So if we want to stroke the path, we can do that up there in the path style. So if we want to stroke the path, we can always do that up there in the paths window. And if you don't see the paths window, go to Windows, Dockable Dialog, Paths. It should pop up there by default. Or if you're in if you're not in single windowed mode, it'll pop up in its own window possibly. Okay, let's see what else. Color selection, the color dropper tool or color picker tool. So if you have an area on your layer that you want to grab the color from, like let's say we want the gray from around this ellipse, you just use the color picker tool, click where you want it, and you can do a sample if you want to like grab from a big area. So this is kind of like an average. And that's going to replace your colors in your color selection boxes over here with the one you have selected. So if you want to grab like the background color too, we can do a selection. Now, of course, if you want to sample all layers, sample merged again. So by doing that, we can get this white text without actually selecting the text layer up here, the Gimp 2.8 text layer. So let's see. Yeah, this is just a really useful tool because sometimes you want to grab a color and you want to reuse it, and that's the tool to use for that. So next up, the zoom tool. If you have this selected and you left click, it's going to zoom in. If you hold control down, it's going to zoom out. Alternatively, if you want it to zoom out by left click, you change the direction in the tool options, and now left click is out and control left click is zoom in. Up to you what you want for that. Next up, the measure tool. If there's an area of your document you want to know roughly how many pixels it is, like let's say this text here, from here to here, we can measure that, get kind of a rough angle there. So you can see down here that line we just measured was 89 pixels and 0.64 degrees. I believe that's in a positive nature. We can also drag these endpoints up and down if we want to. And there we have a perfect 90-degree line there. So not a tool that I think is useful too often, but if you're designing something precise like web design, that may be a tool you want. So the move tool, we've already kind of covered that a bit. If you want to move anything like, let's say this text, that's going to be using the move tool, or this layer in the background. Pretty self-explanatory. So next up we have the alignment tool. First, I'm going to move this text up so that it's not aligned. And then with the alignment tool, we can, what we're going to be doing is selecting an element, basically a layer or selection in our document, in this case the text here, and we're going to align it to something. So relative to, I'm going to say active layer, and then I'm going to select the item I want to align it to. So I'm going to make sure that it's centering over there. I'm going to, or you should select it first rather, and then center it, and then center it. And now this Gimp text has been aligned relative to this layer over here. And to prove that, I'm going to move this way over here, and we'll do that one more time. So I'm going to use the active layer relative to. We're going to select this, and then I'm going to center it relative to that. And you can see it moves over. It's perfectly centered on the photo layer. And of course, there's other options in here depending on how you want to align, but we'll leave it at that for right now. So I'm going to hit Control Z a couple times to undo. Next up, we're going to use the crop tool, which allows us to basically cut off the edges of an image and only have what we want to be in the final product. So by default, if you have this crop tool selected, it's going to be cropping from the entire image. So if I want this image to be, let's say, this space over here and cut the borders off, I just drag a box, select it, hit enter, and we've cropped our image. Now that looks terrible, of course, because it cuts off the text on the outside. So let's say we only want to crop one layer. So current layer only. We can make a selection here, hit enter, and we've cropped that. So now we have like a black border around our thumbnail, which is progressively becoming worse as we go through this tutorial. But yeah, that's how you would do a quick crop. Of course, there's also other ways to do it, such as you can go up here to image, do canvas size. That'll reduce the max size of the image, which kind of ends up being a crop. So if I do something like 1280 by 960, you can see the crop with this box over here, and then the layers reposition. So let's do a resize there, and the outer sections of these layers just got cropped off. We'll talk more about those menu items up there in a bit. So next up, the rotate tool. You have a layer or a selection and you want to rotate it. So you use the rotate tool. We click on what we want to rotate and we rotate it around. When you have it where you want it, hit rotate, and yeah, that's basically what there is to that. Of course, you can always do it with selections. So let's rotate this selection and -35 angle. Okay, there we go. So similar tools are all of these other transforms we have up here. Scale tool, if you want to resize something. So let's resize that section to make it way bigger. You can also scale it down. Shear, which is going to kind of angle it. So let's do it to this entire layer. And we shear it to the right, which gives it kind of a weird perspective. Rather than front facing, it's now kind of a different polygonal shape. But yeah, basically if you want to change which sides are facing what angles, these are the kind of tools you want to use for that. Perspective tool. So this is only going to be affecting specific corners rather than all corners at once. So if we want the bottom to look much closer, we drag those out. And now the top looks like it's in the distance and the bottom looks like it's closer to us. But you'll notice that the layer, because the max size of the layer wasn't big enough, that the changes, they get cut off here. So nothing can be beyond the size of the black line layer here. So in order to fix that, I'm going to go up to the layer menu and we're going to do layer boundary size. I'm going to set this something way high, like 2500 by 2500 pixels. And maybe we want to move this area of the layer and position it kind of closer to the center. So I'm going to cut and remove that. And let's move this layer up here. So I'm doing a shift click with the move tool. And now let's go back and do the perspective tool one more time. So I'm going to take these bottom corners and make them way wider. Okay, and actually it's doing it to the whole layer right now. So the corners are way out here. We can go even further out than that. And we'll try transforming that. So obviously, because this is dealing with a pretty big size, it's going to take a little longer to process, but it's not too bad, or it shouldn't be too bad, hopefully. Then we can move on to some of the other tools. Okay, there we go. So hopefully you can kind of see this bottom area has been stretched out, whereas the top area almost looks like it's a little bit further in the distance because we left those top corners closer together. Flip tool, if we want to flip something horizontally, we just left click. If we want to flip it vertically, we change the flip type or hit control, and then we flip that. I'm going to skip over the cage transform tool for right now, and we'll go to the text tool. So if you want to create text within Gimp, this is the tool you have to use. You can select your font here, either type in the name of the font or left click for a drop down menu, and any fonts you install on your computer should show up here as well. The size of the text is going to be there, and you can change the color of the font there. Now I recommend you use these tool options before you start editing. If you left click, you can see that you have most of those same options over there, though I just find that I run into less issues if I use the tool options to set things up first. So now I have chunk 5x as my font, 200 pixels, white color, and I can start typing, so we'll say test. You can see the four corners and the sides of this text block. And you'll notice that when you do a text, it creates it on its own layer. And we can edit the corners, basically change the boundaries of this text box. You'll notice that by default, it's, well, actually by default, it would be left justified, I think. So that's where it's over on the left. Right justified moves your text to the right of the box. Centered puts it down the middle. And just like in something like Microsoft Word, we can hit the Enter button in order to add a new line and move it further down. We can also type in multiple lines. And it's also possible within one text box to change the settings on that particular, in any text characters you have there. So if I want to bold that, I can do that. If I want to change that to a different font like Sans, I can do that. Should be able to anyway. So for this particular case, if we type it over here, it might change it for the whole box. So I'm going to select this and type Sans. Okay, there, that's what we're looking for. So Okay, well you can see I actually let the text get cut off there. It still exists. We would just have to hit backspace and make sure it's in our box. But this text over here is a different font than the one down here. Alternatively, we could just add in a second text box. So second text, and drag that, let's say, over there. Now, one tool I'll show you guys really quick. Of course, this is things that we were originally going to talk about later, but I think it makes sense here. Under filters, light and shadow, drop shadow. If you want to make text stand out more, I would recommend trying this drop shadow script. So blur radius and increase the opacity. And this is going to apply a drop shadow to whatever layer we have selected, in this case, the text. So I'm going to hit OK here. And you can see that it gave shadow to the text. So that's a really good way to make your text stand out. Just that should be relevant since we're talking about the text tool right now. So I'm going to hide these layers. Oh, and by the way, the drop shadow layer is its own thing. It's not a permanent change to the text, but it's another layer behind it. So if I was to move this text, or move the drop shadow, then we would probably want to reapply that drop shadow on a new layer and delete this one. So next up, let's talk about the pencil tool. Okay, I'm going to select this pixel area over here. So usually the pencil tool would just be used with pixel selection, and we have 50 pixels. So this is going to kind of do a very blocky drawing. We can also select other options like these brushes. But that's not really using pencil. It's kind of just using like a paintbrush without the hardness or the soft edges. So you can see the difference here between a pencil brushstroke and a paintbrush brushstroke. Also, notice that the pencil pixels are very blocky on the edge, whereas with the brush, it tries to be kind of soft and smooth. So if you want hard edges, the pencil tool might be what you're looking for. So for instance, if you just want to draw a straight line, kind of like underline text, which you can actually underline just by using the text tool too, but let's say you wanted to do something like this, you could just draw it with the pencil tool, and that's one option to do it. So next up, the eraser. Let's say that we don't want that at all. The exact opposite of the pencil tool, we can just erase this section. Notice that it only edits the layer that you're currently on. Another really good reason to keep your things separate. So we can erase this layer all day without affecting anything from the other layers. Next up, the Airbrush tool. So the idea here is that you have different levels of pressure controlled by rate and flow, and you can kind of draw over the same things multiple times, like an airbrush, where to make something thick, you just draw over it multiple times. I think this is the kind of tool that's going to be a lot more useful for people with a graphics drawing tablet, but you get the idea there. We can increase the flow so that each time we go over it, it's a lot thicker. And for stylistic purposes, that could be a useful tool for you. Similarly, the ink tool is going to allow you to do calligraphy style painting. Much better, of course, when you have a drawing tablet with some sensitivity input. You're not going to get a lot of use out of it with the mouse because a mouse left click only has one level of sensitivity. But if you use a drawing tablet, you can kind of get some of these lines to be thicker or lighter depending on how hard you press down. Next up, the clone tool. How you use this to copy one area to another is that you control left click to select a area to copy from, and then you left click and kind of drag around, and it's going to do an exact copy from that previous area. So we get that iris again, and you notice that the cursors on both are going to track in sequence with each other. So doing this, we can do weird things like copy a face of eyes, and oh my gosh, that is pretty creepy. Okay, we're going to skip over the healing tool and the perspective clone tool for this video, since they're kind of a bit more advanced, and we'll go to blur, sharpen, smudge, and dodge burn tools, which are kind of all very similar in the purposes. So blur or sharpen, if we have it on blur, it's going to kind of make part of our image a lot harder to see, in other words, blurring it out. Also, we can hit Control to do the opposite, which is sharpen image, which in this case is going to kind of make it a lot more high in contrast, a lot kind of, I would say, tougher to look at. I'm not really sure how to describe it. But the idea is that they're polar opposites with each other. This is probably not a great image to use sharpen on. But yeah, blur and sharpen. If you want something to be kind of hard to see clearly, use blur. Otherwise, use sharpen, and it's going to kind of increase the contrast and make it a lot more dramatic in how you look at it. So next up, we have the smudge tool, which is kind of like as if you had a painting that was still drying, but then you accidentally pressed on it with your thumb and you smudged it. That's kind of what you're looking at here. It's to smear it and make it a little bit less, I guess you would say, easy to tell what it originally was, because you're taking the original ink there, kind of, and you're spreading it all over the place. So it's similar to blur in that it makes it a lot harder to see. I'm sure you can find some artistic uses out of it if that's your thing. So finally, for the toolbox, we have the dodge burn tool. Generally, when you use dodge, it's going to kind of lighten an area up. So you may have very specific sections you want to make a little brighter, like hair or something of that nature. And then burn, the opposite, is going to darken it. So let's try darkening the lips a bit. Now, of course, you're going to want to be a lot more careful with this. And if you let go, you can continue burning it or darkening it until you get the results you're looking for. Then we can dodge around the lips to make the surrounding area look brighter. And yeah, just demonstrating the tools here. Obviously, some pretty terrible graphic editing there. But that's the idea. Dodge is to lighten up an area, and burn makes it dark. So let's go ahead now and start talking about the menus that we have up here at the top left, starting with the File menu. This is where you would create new documents, open up other ones, and you can create a document, basically getting started by loading up a screenshot or a logo or anything else you kind of want to import up here. Alternatively, you can just open a file and that works fine. You can see your recent documents, save and save as. Save as allows you to set a specific name, whereas save will use the name of the previous image and overwrite it. You can save copies. You can export to different formats, which is actually important here. So you can see in the top left, this is a .xcf file. That is what Gimp uses for its basically Gimp documents, where you open them up and you can still edit them. But when you actually want them to show up on the web or something like that, you want to export as a PNG. This export option uses the last export settings, but you can export to all kinds of different images here. .jpeg, probably the most common. You also got other ones like .gif, .png, pretty much whatever you want to export it to, Gimp can do that. And then you can, of course, close all of your open documents and quit out the program. As well as if you're going to print, you can set some settings up for how it's going to print out, what kind of paper you're using, make sure it looks good in the printer preview, that kind of stuff. And the edit menu, we have options like undo, redo, and seeing the undo history. So if you want to undo something, basically revert the last change, hit Control Z, or you can go up here. If you want to redo the last undo, basically something that you undid but you actually did want it, you can hit Control Y, or you can go up here to the edit menu. Anything that you have selected, basically like some pixels, I like to use Control X to do it, but you can go up here and hit cut. You can see the shortcut is Control X, and basically cut those pixels out, which gets put into the buffer. And when it's in the buffer, you can use paste or paste into to copy that clipboard contents. The clipboard contents is whatever we just cut out or copied. And we can paste that in. So with paste, we have that information here. So, and we can paste it again, Control V, Control V, Control V. You get the idea. That's exactly the same thing as what you have up here in the menu. And you can see what's in the buffer by going over here and pasting named. So, okay, actually, that's a new window I didn't know about. So there is actually a paste buffer window. So dockable dialogues, let's see, buffers. So we can see we have this here. So also in the edit menu, we have fill with foreground color, background color, and pattern, which is the same kind of stuff you find over here with the bucket fill tool, but we can use the edit menu to do that. Also, you can see shortcuts for it, control, and then the comma, control period, and control semicolon. So we can try that here right now. Control comma, filled with the black foreground color. Cool. Also, if you want to edit any preferences within Gimp, that's one of the things you can pop this up and open for. We won't go through all these settings today, obviously, but that's probably the first place you want to check for setting up options. Next, we have the select menu. So if you ever wanted to do something like select everything on a layer, you want to get rid of your selection, or you want to select from path, you notice those are the very similar options that you have when you do a right click and then select, same menu more or less. Then you can do that. So select all is going to grab everything in your current layer. You see it doesn't select everything in the document, but just the current layer. And yeah, that's more or less what you got going on over there. You can also invert the selection if you want to like select everything that's not that you don't have selected in that layer. So okay, we have this box selected. We invert that, and now we're actually editing everything around it. And then below those tools, we have options for changing how we're selecting this area. So with the feather tool, we can basically get the corners to kind of curve rather than being a hard rectangle. So by doing that, we can kind of add smooth corners to it. Or we can select a border, which is only going to select the outer pixels, so 10 pixels or something like that. And then now we have a border of that area selected, and we can fill that in, I imagine. Let's try doing that. Let's try doing it with a color that will stand out more, so like red. Okay. And yeah, somehow we got the border of the entire layer there, but you get the idea. And you can also increase or decrease the sizes of your selections with shrink and grow, pretty self-explanatory. Rounded rectangle, also going to get you similar results to feather, of course. So rounded rectangle, and there we go. In the view menu, we mostly have a lot of tools for controlling what's going to be showing on screen and what's not. So in Gimp, you can have guides, which are kind of these lines that go down the middle or the side of an image and allow you to kind of snap things to it or serve as a reference point. We also have a grid where if we toggle that on, we can see the entire document in basically a bunch of squares. Now, these squares don't exist. They're not going to print out, but you can do things like snap to grid, snap to guides, and they're just for reference points. You can also increase and decrease the zoom up here and make your program full screen, but it's already pretty much full screen for me. But okay, well, full screen including getting rid of the bar at the bottom. So in order to set up a guide, you actually go over to the image menu, so image guides, and I'm going to create a new guide by percent, so 50%. We have this blue dotted guide, and now if we want to snap anything to that, because on the view menu we have snap to guides, I can just do something like drag this over here, and you see where that center cross gets close to the guide, it's going to snap. And that's the idea of snapping to guides, snapping to grids. You can, of course, change the size of your grids by going into preferences. So edit preferences. Yeah, that's most of the kind of stuff you have going on there. You can also control whether or not the rulers show up. So show rulers, hide rulers, and those are currently measured in pixels, but they can measure in other things as well, like inches if you want. So these inches are determined by the document's DPI, basically density pixels per inch, I think, which is how many pixels across is 1 inch. One setting you can set up while you're printing out, or before you print out anything. Okay, let's see. In the image menu, canvas size, we kind of talked about that. If you want to scale up your image, the actual canvas, all your layers combined, what the total canvas size or the total workspace for your image is, we can do that. So by default, it basically snaps the height and the width together. I currently have that not enabled. So if you see that link broke, then click that. So we can increase the size, goes up to 2000 pixels, and this goes up correspondingly, and we resize it. It doesn't resize the contents of the document, it just resizes the workspace, what would actually print out or what would actually go into an exported PNG image. Okay, likewise, if you want to actually scale it, but I'll actually scale all the layers as well, scale image is going to be really useful there. So let's do that again. 2000 scale, and this is going to make all the layers get really big. And yes, they may get distorted a little bit if you're scaling upwards, so be aware of that. I believe that Gimp has some tools, there's interpolation tools for kind of scaling without losing as much of the, I guess you would say, detail as possible. So it kind of, with guesswork, kind of figures out how it should look if it was just taking the image and making it bigger without making things too blurry. But if you turn off interpolation, that's when you'll start to get some blurs. Okay, under image, configure grid. If you, like I was talking about earlier, if you want to change the size of the grid pixels or you want it to be dashed rather than solid, you can do that there. We're going to just kind of quickly go through the menus here because this video is already getting really long. So hopefully this is covering most of what you need to know. And if you do have any questions, feel free to let me know down below, and maybe I can cover them in future videos as well. Also, more information was covered in my Gimp course on Udemy. Maybe I'll put the link to that down below too. So let's see, layer. This is kind of like the layer dialog box. You have a lot of the same settings over here. So you can obviously create a new layer under the layers box just by hitting new layer, but you can also go up here to new layer. You can duplicate layers. You can merge them down, which we demonstrated before. Delete layers. Add alpha channels to layers. So not every layer will have an alpha channel by default. Like particularly if you get a background layer here by default, those don't come with alpha, and you can add alpha in it. Transforming a layer if you want to flip it across. So we can demonstrate that real quick. So transform, flip horizontally, flip horizontally. Okay, there we go, and you can see it flips the information. And scaling a layer particularly, that's going to be pretty useful. So if you want to scale just one layer, you can use this tool. So let's drop it down to like 2500 pixels width. And rather than scaling everything in the image, it's only scaling this particular layer here. Next up, the colors menu. Whenever you want to change a layer and you want to change a color on it, you want to modify the colors in the foreground, the midground, or the shadows, which you can do with color balance. Increase brightness, decrease brightness, increase contrast, or things of that nature, or even invert an entire layer's colors like that. You have access to all of those tools up there. And I think those are mostly the ones that I've used. So let's talk about color balance, hue, saturation, and colorize, or brightness, contrast rather. So next, with the color balance tool, we can select different ranges of color within our Gimp document or our layer that we have currently selected, and kind of play around with what colors are going to show up there. So if I change the shadows, you can see that kind of down here where it's a little bit darker on this chrome symbol that the color levels go down a bit, or they change rather. But if I go to highlights, it's going to do very different changes because these are the areas which are brightest on the layer. So that's why that's getting affected more specifically. We can just kind of bring out some of the colors more dramatically than others. And you can see here how if you have an image, especially if you have a photo image, that you can do some pretty crazy color effects there. Now, with hue saturation, you're kind of more talking about the entire image all at once. So if I bump the hue, we've changed the color to something kind of like, I don't know, anti-chrome logo or something like that. You can increase the brightness, decrease or increase the saturation. Pretty self-explanatory. A very useful tool, though. And with brightness contrast, it's similar. You're affecting the whole layer at once. So do you want it to be darker, brighter? Do you want low contrast, or do you want... Wait, wow, that was way too much contrast. Jeez. And yeah, those are probably the three main color tools that you're going to be using. Also, invert color, similar to changing the hue saturation. So in this next menu, the tools menu, you pretty much literally just have the same tools that you have over here in the toolbox, but instead as a drop-down menu. So I think everything on this list exists over here except this thing, which I have no idea what that actually is. Click on it. Who knows? But usually you can just use the toolbox for that. But if you want to use the drop-down menu, well, you can do that there. So filters, we did touch on this a little bit earlier. If you want to apply an effect over your image, then filters is going to be the place to do it. So we did talk about drop shadow before, where we can take any layer and give it a shadow, make it stand out more, and that's a really cool and useful effect. But you have a lot of other ones over here too. So like, for instance, you can add border to an image just by using that tool. And you can see it's kind of got these edges on it, so it's almost like a picture frame. You can do things like go to the artistic menu, and you can cartoonify a image. And this is probably not a good one to use for it. Well, we can try it. Okay, that's going to be better on like. We can also go down to something like the artistic menu and try something like glass tile to kind of dramatically change how it's going to look. So let's try that there. I don't know how that's going to be. Very, very weird effect. Okay, a better example probably, let me see if I can find the cubism. Is that what I'm looking for? Okay, well, that's one example. So cubism, that's actually kind of cool. You have a lot of different options here in the filters menu, and for the most part, you just have to go ahead and look through them. Common ones like blurs up there at the top, lighting effects. If you want like a lens flare, you can do that. Set the location of the lens flare, and there you go. Yeah, and that's pretty much all there is to that. It's kind of like you need to explore a bit, figure it out for yourself, and see what you can create using those filters. Okay, and then finally, the windows. There are a lot of windows in Gimp that we didn't really touch on, but the ones we did touch on are the ones you're probably going to be using the most. But if you ever need to open something else up, like you need to open up the buffers, or you want to open a fonts dialog, this is where you would do that. But yeah, once again, the two most important windows that you're almost always going to have open are the layers, which is over here, and the toolbox, which is over there. Toolbox, you go Windows Tools. For the layers, it's dockable dialogues, and then layers or Control L on your keyboard. And you can also open recently closed docs by going here, but you can see I don't have any recently closed ones, so it's only if you did close one. And then on the help menu, you can open up the Gimp manual, see what plugins and procedures are installed into Gimp. And I would say if you ever want to get more information about how Gimp works, a good source is going to be docs.gimp.org/2.8/en or whatever the current version is / your language. And you can go through here and read up information about just about everything in Gimp as well. So with that, that's going to be the conclusion of this relatively complete tutorial for beginners in 2.8 version of Gimp. I've been Chris. Thank you very much if you stuck around to the end for going through all this content. I really hope it's helped you out to learn a lot of these features within Gimp. And hopefully I'll see you guys in my future video content.